Shiro here for Umbra Games, and well, another year, another in review, where I take a few minutes and look back at everything I played this year, put in ascending order of quantitative rating. Scores are always a funny thing because they are extremely subjective, but as I always say, being a data guy, it does help us keep things in order. Now, if you're familiar with my videos, I use different criteria based on the game's genre. And honestly, it's more useful comparing scores of the same genre than it is to put them all in one list. I mean, no matter how high you rate the new Madden, it's not going to be something I run out and get. Taking Earthlock Festival of Magic compared to Persona 5 compared to Battle Chasers Night War, however, because I only have time for one 20 to 90 hour turn-based JRPG this year makes more sense, finding the game with the best quality mechanics and criteria. With my rating scale, I use a true 1 to 100, so 50 is an average game. Release dates are for physical copies where applicable for the console I played on. Keep in mind this is all the games that I finished and actually have a video review out for in 2017. My backlog is pretty crippling, and I also keep in touch with friends by playing any online cooperative title we can find and complete, so you'll see a few of those sprinkled in. Also, I'm one guy with finite resources. There were tons more games of 2017 I wanted to play, just didn't get around to. Now, YouTube has removed the ability for all the links I'd need to display, so if you're interested in checking out the full review, I've added those into the description. And with that, let's get started. For the second year in a row, a motorcycle gang game ranks at the bottom of the yearly list. Road Rage focuses more on racing than last year's Ride to Hell, and the developer should be ashamed for playing on our nostalgic strings, making it so close to the old series called Road Rash. Road Rage has inconsistent physics, a story that doesn't match the gameplay events, and some of the worst voice acting I've heard in years. The roguelike mechanics are showing up mixed with several different genres these days, and what better fit than an isometric fantasy dungeon crawler? It's easy to see the intent of Super Dungeon Brothers, but the execution ended up pretty frustrating and boring, while failing in many technical aspects. The first Cannon Lynch failed pretty badly, and with this one, Dog Days, free on Xbox Games with Gold this year, Velcro and I figured we'd give it a playthrough. Unfortunately, the lack of feedback from firing on enemies, the blurry hand camera effect, and the 4.5 hour campaign were enough to keep this one pretty low on the scale as well. An extremely disappointing follow-up to one of my favorite unique strategy RPG series, Valkyria Chronicles. Revolution opted for repetitious, grinding hack and slash instead. There's an overabundance of long cutscenes, superficial one-dimensional characters, and some nice tries at developing some new game mechanics that ultimately just fell flat. I think subscriber Dark Western said it best about Broforce: what you see is what you get. Characters you rescue from action movies of the last few decades and their unique abilities are fun to discover, but you can make stages unfinishable. We had tons of spots of weird network issues, and sometimes there were so many explosions it made it extremely difficult to tell what was even going on. For the low price to entry though, there is fun to be had. I was never much into the live-action games of the Sega CD era. I'd describe myself as a pretty hardcore gamer, and the interactive movie genre never quite resonated with me. Cult classic, Night Trap's 25th anniversary re-release, cleaned up that pixely video, and playing together with my friend Open Water Swim did bring some joy and quite a few laughs, but objectively speaking, there's not much here but memorization, bad acting, and a digital game of whack-a-mole. For me, Super Bomberman on SNES was the peak of the Bomberman series, and Konami failed to retain that magic for Super Bomberman R, a launch game for the Switch. They introduced some fun mechanics and environments in a 3-hour campaign, but it got repetitive fairly quickly, and the precision control was missing. The online multiplayer seemed stable, with not a whole lot of match customization, but without being able to shoot evil glares at each other for cheap kills, the experience was lessened for me. I finally got around to finishing The Crew this year, thanks to White Gravy, and I think we could definitely use more open-world cooperative racing games. The Crew overemphasized the terribleness of low-leveled cars, and the complex leveling system only seemed to be noticeable in the extremes. The AI was fairly sketchy too, but being able to drive coast to coast of a slightly warped United States, participating in a handful of varied event types, made for an entertaining if not flawed experience. I loved Ninja Turtles back in the day, so every time I see a new title approach, I falsely get my hopes up. Seeing developer Platinum Games' name on it raised my hopes even higher, but unfortunately overall Mutants in Manhattan felt like a generic hack and slash without a whole lot of personality, let alone 4 personalities. The cel-shaded look resonated with me, but the uninteresting plot and chaotic combat left this feeling like a shell of a game. While Rez itself doesn't accelerate with depth of gameplay or mechanics, its integration with sound and music provide a very unique experience. Top that off with infinite VR capabilities, and it provides a pretty amazing level of immersion. In my attempt to catch up with the Assassin's Creed series this year in time for Origins, I ventured to an amazing virtual rendition of Paris with tons of stuff to do, and a climbing and combat system that seemed to have taken a massive step back. Unity was the first to be built on Ubisoft's new next-generation engine, and it shows. From running on air to sloppy combat animation, it's easy to see why fans reacted as they did. This is even after 4 huge patches to make it, quote, playable. Vikings Wolves of Midgard came out of nowhere with very little fanfare, being a full-price $60 dungeon crawler built with the Unity engine. After waiting for quite a price drop, Hercules and I ventured into this world of Norse mythology Diablo style. The game is a fairly extensive campaign that requires some grinding to get through, has little replay value to us due to the character leveling and equipment restrictions. We had a few network issues playing online co-op and some collision and battle animation problems too, but you could do worse. I'm a huge turn-based RPG fan, so seeing titles of this genre release this console generation physically gets my attention. Earthlock really focuses on strategy in each battle instead of button-mashing random encounters. It has a crafting system, gardening, a few optional hidden bosses, and an overworld with unique environments. Level cap felt like it came a little early, and it could have used a bit more side content though. The standalone expansion for Dead Island Riptide, picks up with the 4 zombie apocalypse survivors right after the events of the first game. The game features more of the same first-person melee combat with a decent number of side quests, tons of weapons, and skill trees unique to each character. Unfortunately, 100% completion has you retreading familiar ground way too often, and the game features a pretty predictable plot with lackluster dialogue and voice acting. The third entry of the Gears of War series continued to push the Xbox 360, displaying some great visuals and environments. It also continues the solid shooting cover-based mechanics the series is known for, and also the same one-dimensional characters participating in an even bigger epic plot than previous titles. Of course, this also brings the corridor format with stop-and-go set pieces and weapons that force you to switch often due to lack of ammo. You can bring 4 players to the cooperative campaign this time, and it also features quite a few more online multiplayer versus options. Looking for more cooperative shooters, Hercules and I tapped High Moon Studios' version of the Transformers War for Cybertron. This game was praised highly by critics and fans alike. Playing both sides of the war of Autobots versus Decepticons was a nice addition, but not being huge Transformers fans to start with, the game kind of just ended up being a fairly bland and repetitive shooter overall. Thanks to Limited Run Games' attention to physical releases, my attention was drawn to this unique half-strategy, half-isometric dungeon crawler zombie-killing game, Breach and Clear Deadline. Stop the action and direct each of your people on where to move and what to attack, and then press the trigger as quickly as you want to direct them to that location. Had a few crashing issues here and there, but the unique take on the genre made this game quite the surprise. Another game with roguelike mechanics, this time a pixelated 2D platform shooter with local and online co-op. Risk of Rain has each playthrough having different stages you can end up in, with the teleporter goal also being randomized. There are several unlockable items and characters with 4 unique moves on independent cooldowns. Your success is very gear dependent with each playthrough, and the unlocking mechanics for new items was a bit wonky at times, as well as suffering some occasional progress loss. Featuring one of the biggest open worlds I've seen, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands has you covertly invading Bolivia in an attempt to take down a cartel. Play with 3 AI companions or with friends online. The goals and missions get a bit repetitive if you try and do everything, but there are tons of skills to level, stuff to collect, and vehicles to drive. You can be much more successful at the game if you push stealth over guns blazing, which with online friends isn't always easy. The final Xbox 360 era Gears of War is Gears of War Judgment, a side story featuring familiar characters. The game's campaign takes place with a series of flashbacks told before a court, and the added mechanic of choosing to tell specific parts of the story for added challenge was pretty unique. The stages were short though, and a little jarring in their transition. A fairly short, point-and-click adventure game in virtual reality, Batman Arkham VR lets you spend some time behind the eyes of the Caped Crusader. You spend some time at a crime scene rebuilding the various pieces, explore a morgue and a sewer, and come face to face with a few Batman regulars. But overall the game ended up feeling a bit like an introduction to a game, rather than a game itself, although coming face to face with the Joker in VR can make you feel a bit uneasy. Online multiplayer shooters aren't really my thing, but leave it to Nintendo to take away the familiar violence from the formula with Splatoon. Take control of Inklings and cover maps in your gang color while popping enemy squids. The game has an undersold single-player campaign, though smaller in size, takes advantage of the unique move mechanic of swimming quickly in squid form in your own ink color. Tried to squeeze this in on Wii U before the sequel that launched on Nintendo Switch this year. Taking a year off from a core Assassin's Creed title, Ubisoft released 3 episodic side-scrolling games in the Assassin's Creed universe digitally. 3 were then put out together in a physical release called Assassin's Creed Chronicles, featuring 3 stories and 3 independent timelines that all sort of come together, with art styles unique to their period. Chronicles features hours of 2D stealth assassinating action. Based on the God Eater anime, God Eater 2 Rage Burst takes mechanics from Capcom's Monster Hunter series, sending you on dozens of missions to take down gigantic beasts, but in a post-apocalyptic world. Use the materials you gather from the environment in your kills to craft new gear and take down even bigger threats. Apparently an attempt to go for a full reboot, Need for Speed, with no subtitle, takes to the open world streets with a variety of events and vehicles. EA opted for live-action cutscenes that fade pretty seamlessly into gameplay, even if they are a little cheesy. While not the best title out there in the open-world racing genre, the game has a fairly lengthy campaign and some nice extra content. Finally coming back around for Assassin's Creed Liberation HD means I've completed Assassin's Creed The Americas Collection. Originating on Vita, this game does feel slightly light in the content area, but features a female protagonist and some neat new mechanics, and a great rendition of New Orleans in the 1700s. Probably one of the biggest disappointments of the year, Mass Effect Andromeda had a high bar to hit to keep it with the original trilogy. It just wasn't quite up to the task. There's a solid enough game here that does often get overlooked by all the blatant missteps, but instead of being at the middle of the countdown for 2017, we all expected it to be at the top. With free versions available on PSN, the PlayStation exclusive Drive Club launched to a rocky start but managed to pull itself together over a few months, adding more racetracks and vehicles. The game's presentation is slightly plainer than other competitors on the market, but features a campaign with dozens of events and online matches with only minimal cheating. Taking Minecraft for some obvious inspiration, Portal Knights is an action RPG heavily reliant upon crafting and exploration. Build portal blocks to connect the fragmented world back together, grabbing increasingly strong materials to equip yourself for the challenges that lie ahead. Sequel to the PlayStation 4 launch title Knack, developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment Japan, Knack 2 marks the return of the multi-fragmented protagonist in a much more cohesive adventure. This 3D action platformer has you punching and crashing your way through the smallest vents and the tallest skyscrapers. For Honor is a third-person hack-and-slash with a combat system requiring greater timing and skill than others in the genre. Choose between knights, vikings, or samurai, and then choose which direction to hold your sword as you block and slash your way to victory. The game features a 12-hour single or multiplayer campaign, but it's clearly more focused on the 4-on-4 multiplayer versus mode. I always love to find those indie games that can really make an impression, and Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time does just that. Play with up to 4 people cooperatively as you try to steer a ship through the cosmos, rescuing friends and taking down aggressive aliens. Each part of the ship has to be controlled independently, meaning you really have to get your team to work together well to survive. Redout is a super fast-paced anti-gravity racer in the same vein as F-Zero and Wipeout. You'll definitely have to sharpen your skills and reaction times to take on blazing fast tracks and a handful of events across multiple worlds. The game features several upgradable vehicles and power-ups to help you survive the competition and the missing guardrails. After a brief misstep with Assassin's Creed Unity, the series was put back on track with Assassin's Creed Syndicate. While still keeping one giant continuous land-based map, obvious steps were made with the game's engine to make control and combat more approachable. The Victorian England setting worked magnificently as a backdrop for the continuing struggle between Assassins and Templars. At first a Vita exclusive and then a limited physical release of a PS4 remastered version through Amazon.com, Gravity Rush adds a new take to gravity-defying action. Protagonist Kat has the ability to change the direction of her local gravity, allowing her to travel and fight in ways we haven't experienced before. The game is open world and mission-based, and also had a PS4 sequel launch in early 2017. Naughty Dog gave us our first Nathan Drakeless Uncharted since his series came to a close. Originally planned as an expansion pack to Uncharted 4, Lost Legacy follows series characters Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross with the same epic plot and a lot of the same game mechanics we saw in 4. All in all, the game was worthy to bear the Uncharted name, even though it was a slightly smaller experience, clocking in around 7 to 8 hours. In an attempt to revive the collection platformers of the N64 era, former Rare employees got together to form a new studio called Playtonic Games. The first title is one very reminiscent of Rare's popular Banjo-Kazooie, pairing a chameleon and a bat who work together to perform special attack and traversal moves to navigate a hub world and connected areas, gathering golden pages. While the game did ride a bit on nostalgic humor and gameplay, it was modernized just enough to be a very solid title in 2017. Another title brought up from the vault for some cooperative online play, Dead Space 3 is what appears to be Isaac Clarke's final installment in this space survival horror turned mostly shooter series, at least for now. Featuring the series' notorious necromorphs, complete with removable limbs, with a higher level of weapon customization, it's a bit sad that we probably won't see a sequel or even an HD remaster for this franchise. A Nintendo Switch RPG released this year, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 seems more of a sequel to the Wii Xenoblade Chronicles rather than to the more recent Xenoblade Chronicles X. Featuring some pretty complex mechanics and systems, in combat and out, this auto-attack style RPG is highly character-oriented, has a ton of content, and kind of feels like you're playing an MMORPG. With the main quest chain taking around 60 to 70 hours though, this is one of the biggest Switch titles we saw in its opening year. Nintendo's flagship launch title with the Nintendo Switch, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild attempts to take all the things we love about open-world RPGs and blend them with all the things we love about Zelda. Many reviewers were quick to 10 out of 10 this game, and while it is a solid entry to the series, objectively it's not quite perfect. With only 4 real dungeons to speak of, the game's focus on exploration and smaller-scale puzzle solving was entertaining, but definitely a bit of a departure from the series' roots. When we heard about a Mario and Rabbids crossover, it was easy to quickly dismiss the thought of it as a low-content party game. What we got with Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battles is a tactical RPG that plays a little bit like XCOM in the Mushroom Kingdom, with tons of wacky features from Rabbids and Mario to keep battles entertaining and keep you on your toes. This is one of my biggest pleasant surprises of the year, and if you own a Switch, you should definitely give this game a chance. Mario returns for a core 3D collection platformer that we haven't seen the likes of since Mario Galaxy 2 on Wii. Guide Mario and his new friend Cappy as they jump and capture their way over 15 worlds, gathering hidden moons in an attempt to stop Bowser from marrying Princess Peach. Subjectively speaking, this is the closest we've gotten to a true sequel to Mario 64, with the varied environments and tons of secrets on every map. Super Mario Odyssey isn't just a must-own on the Switch, but a reason to actually buy a Switch. Another surprise this year was Cat Quest. I didn't really have any idea what I was getting into with this PS4 game originally developed for mobile platforms. What I got was a fairly simple action RPG with some dodging and spells, quite the armor selection, and a bunch of quests that could be platinum in about 8 or 9 hours. It was fun the entire time. The second Final Fantasy game to get a significant remaster, Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age, brings this classic Final Fantasy game with the previously unreleased in the US Zodiac Job system. 12 marks the core single-player series departure from turn-based combat, opting instead for an auto-attack system complete with a concept called gambits, sort of like writing lines of code for your AI companions. With a huge story and tons of side content, it was nice to have an excuse to play through this game again with its 2017 release. Watch Dogs 2 took several of the gameplay mechanics from the first Watch Dogs and started to see some of the narrative value implications a massive Big Brother citywide surveillance system could bring. San Francisco is a beautifully rendered playground with plenty to do, and the only major issue I ran into was several walls from the unpolished driving controls. Filled with a cast of colorful characters and crazy quests, Watch Dogs 2 is a good example of how a sequel should build into a better game than its predecessor. Often pegged as a Dark Souls clone, Nioh actually reminded me more of the recent Ninja Gaidens, with a slightly bigger focus on a stamina bar. This ultra-difficult map level selection action RPG is set in a fantasy ancient Japan where demons roam the land and are used to wage wars against rivals. Tons of loot, tons of difficult bosses, and a beautiful, scary world await you in Nioh. Sequel to 2014's reboot of Wolfenstein, Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus continues the more dramatic, character-involved take on B.J. Blazkowicz, as he takes on hordes of Nazis and their experiments in an attempt to retake the United States from them after they won World War II. The game features fast-paced action, combat bonuses based on weapon and skill usage, tons of collectibles, a handful of side quests, a fun story with some incredulous moments, and just a bit of sketchy stealth components. Allegedly, the final entry in the Dark Souls series, I finally got around to 2016's Dark Souls 3. So I try to pace myself just a bit on the super hard games. While it's definitely the prettiest entry we've seen yet, I found it slightly easier than its predecessors, but even with all the other developers starting to implement Dark Souls mechanics, no one has quite mastered that feeling of isolation and unguided exploration like From Software. Kai and Omega Force have continued to find new ways to take their beaten-to-death Misao franchise of endless button mashing by applying new and different faces on the front. Dragon Quest Heroes 2 picks up more as a second number in the series than a true sequel, as you venture through a new world with unique faces, in addition to the familiar Dragon Quest characters. More mechanics and systems are in place to further differentiate this hack and slash from other franchises Omega Force is working on. My expectations for Destiny 2 were a little more on track with its release this year. Viewed as a 12-hour cooperative campaign shooter with some multiplayer, instead of an MMO or shared world shooter, helped me keep with this game in stride. Implementing a story that made sense most of the time, Bungie instilled greater life into the world of the Guardians. The game continues to have event updates and content additions, so hopefully they'll continue to deliver what the fans want. I finally got to another title people are always surprised I hadn't played yet, and this year was The Last of Us. Originally released on PS3, this remastered version on PS4, while you can still kind of tell it wasn't built from the ground up for the system, features enhanced textures and frame rates. It's easy to see the key appeal of this game, in true Naughty Dog fashion, is the huge cinematic story that they always seem to nail, with added moments of disbelief and high tension. The core of the gameplay is stealth action, which I wasn't quite ready for, but this is definitely a title all gamers should experience. Overcooked brings up to 4-player cooperative or versus action in the kitchen, where you have to scramble to prepare food and have it delivered in a timely manner. The game starts simple enough, but soon has you serving during earthquakes, on moving vehicles, and even a journey into space to be prepared for the end of the world where you have to feed a giant meatball monster. Another title, built on Ubisoft's art engine, Rayman Legends is a sequel to Rayman Origins. It's a 2D platformer where up to 4 people can join cooperatively with no extra lives needed. It's easy to see the art makes this installment of Rayman stand out, and it even includes all the stages from Origins that can be unlocked by playing through Legends. The new music theme stages were a hit with us, and be warned, obtaining everything this game has to offer can be challenging. Being the turn-based RPG sucker that I am, I was super happy with the release of Airship Syndicate's Battle Chasers Night War this year, based on the Battle Chasers comic series by Joe Madeira. This game takes so many mechanics of the PS1 RPG era that made those games so great, complete with a lot of side content and ultimate weapons for each character. It adds in some modern-day systems, some beautiful comic book art, and a unique twist on mana regeneration for battle. It's great to see titles like this coming this day and age, so if you're an RPG fan, make sure you check this one out. Clearly built on the same engine as my personal favorite, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Rogue takes the naval combat stealth action to the Americas during the colonial era once again. This game released to the PS3 and 360 the same time as Unity dropped for next-gen console owners, and previous generation players clearly got the win here. There are rumors of a Rogue HD remaster, so if you love Black Flag and did never get around to Rogue, you may be getting your current generation chance. And finally, in 2017, I caught up with Assassin's Creed, just in time for a trip back to the beginning with Assassin's Creed Origins. Origins took quite a departure from the franchise in format, playing more like an open-world RPG rather than being mission progression-based, featuring a quest log, tons of discoverable locations on a huge map of ancient Egypt, and tons of gear and loot to collect. Origins ended up being quite the masterpiece. Topping many critics' lists this year was Persona 5, the JRPG about teenagers living their everyday lives in Japan by day, but exploring the palaces of deadly sinners at night. Part life simulator, part turn-based dungeon crawler, Persona 5's 90-plus hour story brought us interesting characters, decisions on how to build out our silent protagonists, and a glimpse at some of the challenges Japanese teenagers face every day. The elemental combat system with tons of creatures to recruit and level gave this game a depth and complexity that was worth the time commitment. I'm not really familiar with the Puyo games, at least not as much as I was with Tetris. Puyo Puyo Tetris brings both franchises to this console generation, and even an interesting mashup of the two, with a full story mode and several versus modes that you can play locally or online against strangers. One of 2017's biggest releases was the Sony exclusive Horizon Zero Dawn, an open world RPG that looks like tribal warfare against robot dinosaurs in an amazingly beautiful world, hits all of the right notes. From its side quests, to its weapon selection, to its crafting mechanics, to its combat. This year had a few big contenders for my top spot. Rarely seem to find games that hit in the 90s objectively with me, and Horizon Zero Dawn definitely deserves it. My biggest surprise of the year was the return of a pretty unassuming, undersold action RPG series, Nier. Nier, I'm told, is actually a spin-off of another lower-key Square Enix franchise, Drakengard, with Nier Automata being a sequel to one of Drakengard 3's alternate endings. The world has been long destroyed and androids are all that's left, and this game manages to tug a variety of emotions from its startling discoveries, environments, gameplay mechanics, and boss fights. The game doesn't really end until you've completed it multiple times with different characters to see their side of the story, and the game's musical score is integrated in a way that few games have achieved. Nudging out Horizon Zero Dawn by a point for me, Nier Automata is my favorite game released in 2017. Witcher 3 is at the top of what I played this year, but technically it came out in 2015, so it can't be my 2017 game of the year. After struggling through the first two Witcher games, which had an amazing story and characters, CD Projekt Red finally got it together and made combat more entertaining. While they were at it, they made a humongous open world with some of the most interesting side content I've ever experienced. Even spawning a standalone game from its in-game card game Gwent, The Witcher 3 has branching plot points, fantastic creatures, and a very unique main questline. I'm eager to see what CD Projekt Red is going to do with their new franchise, Cyberpunk 2077. So, there you have it. 61 new finished games this year. Please feel free to check out the reviews if you saw anything you were interested in and want more details on. And you're always welcome to leave comments if you agree or disagree with anything here. But more importantly, I hope you had a great 2017 and are looking forward to a stupendous 2018. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching.